Ever since the Snyder Cut of Justice League was announced last year, people have been asking me about the Schumacher Cut, an extended cut of Batman Forever. A lot of people on Twitter have been using the hashtag release the Schumacher Cut. Mark Bernardin and Kevin Smith brought it up on an episode of the Fat Man and Batman podcast, and even Ice Cube made a video asking for it. Okay, that was a cameo video. Someone paid him to ask for that. Most importantly though, in May 2021, Akiva Goldsman, the writer behind Batman Forever, brought it up in an interview. He said, and I quote, "By the way, Batman Forever still has a renaissance coming. I am really interested to see whether the original cut of Batman Forever comes out because I got to see it recently, and the very, very first one, which was Preview Cut 1, it was really dark. It was a pretty psychological exploration of guilt and shame. There's a lot of rumours and conjectures about what this longer version is and what it contains. You know, it's 2 hours 30 minutes, it's 2 hours 45 minutes, it's 3 hours, it's darker, it's more psychological, it doesn't have any jokey humour, it's closer in tone to the Burton movies. I'm gonna try and clear up some of that and give some concrete-ish answers so that people can understand what it probably is. So riddle me this, what is the Schumacher Cut? First off, the Schumacher Cut is a very different thing from Zack Snyder's Justice League. That film saw the director have to contend with copious studio notes to pivot away from the dark tone of Batman v Superman that he'd made. Snyder left during early post-production. Joss Whedon took over and used like an hour-ish of the original 4-hour cut. He shot new, more humorous scenes. He recolored the entire film. He brought in his own composer, blah, 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 blah. Joel didn't have that amount of interference on Batman Forever. As far as I can see from the interviews he gave, he was happy with the film, apart from like some personality clashes maybe with certain actors like Val Kilmer, and having to work with a tight budget. I know he's mentioned that in interviews. The film went pretty smoothly. The original script was written by Janet Leigh and Scott Batchler, and then Joel brought in Akiva Goldsman, who he'd worked with on The Client, to change the dialogue and change a few details. On the whole though, the script didn't change that much. I think a lot of the story is basically there. As movie rewrites go, that's not too bad having two sets of writers, which leads me to believe that there was no behind-the-scenes drama. Yes, Warner Brothers weren't happy with the dark tone of Batman Returns, and Joel was brought in to make a more colourful, more upbeat Batman film. And Joel, being someone who grew up with reading the Batman comics that he enjoyed, in the 50s and 60s, the larger-than-life, I think he enjoyed bringing that larger-than-life Batman to the big screen. In 2005, to coincide with the release of Batman Begins, Warner Brothers released a box set entitled The Batman Anthology 1989 to 1997. In an interview, Joel said that he offered to do a director's cut for that set. Whether or not this cut was made, we don't know. Mark Bernardin, on the Fat Man and Batman podcast, says that there is a 170-minute cut in the Warner Brothers vault. However, he also says he hasn't seen it. So we don't know when that's from. He's heard that from someone else. It's second-hand information. The anthology DVD contains 7 deleted scenes that total about 13 minutes. Some of what Mark is referring to on the Fat Man and Batman podcast ties up with these deleted scenes. So then it's not wholly new information. In March 2021, a Twitter user, MindKidzag, released a scanned shooting script. Now, there have been other versions of the script available online. The Batchler's original Batman 3 script and a later rewrite by Akiva Goldsman. What's special about this scanned script is that it's on coloured paper. In Hollywood, once production starts, the film script gets printed out on coloured paper, and every time a portion of the script is tweaked or changed, it gets printed out on different coloured paper. You end up with kind of like a multitude of colours going throughout the script, and it's so that kind of the various departments know if anything has changed to the script and if it affects them. The date is also put at the top of the page so that you know when things have been changed. Now, this scanned script is dated from October 1994, but there's a few pages in it that are dated February 1995, which would have been when the last bits of filming were completed. What I'm saying is this script is a pretty accurate record of what was shot, and thus for all intents and purposes is probably as close as we can get to finding out what the Schumacher Cut contains. I'm going to go through it now. I'm going to stop even for really minor stuff and show you what's missing and what got altered, some of which will tally with the deleted scenes that are on the DVD and the Blu-ray, some of which will tally with some of the deleted shots from my Batman Forever Unseen video that I did a few years ago. So here we go. Number 1. We start in Arkham. Dr. Burton walks into Two-Face's cell and finds that Two-Face has escaped. A guard's been tied up and he gets pulled up into the ceiling fan, and "The Bat Must Die" is written on the wall of his cell. This is on the DVD deleted scenes. Number 2. Bruce arrives at Wayne Enterprises by helicopter. On the flight over, he's watching a news report on Two-Face's escape. Number 3. Bruce comes into his personal office. A group of assistants hound him about various bits of information, like business and stuff. There's a gag where he's handed the phone, and he has the Japanese Prime Minister on line 1 and a supermodel on line 2, and he says, "Hi, gorgeous," to the Japanese Prime Minister. His assistant Margaret brings up the forthcoming charity circus event and quizzes him on who he's going to bring. Eventually, Bruce tells them all to stop and says that he needs to give himself a raise. A very kind of Michael Keaton-esque kind of thing I always felt with that. Number 4. This leads directly into Bruce doing his visit at the R&D department. Yes, the original script and the original cut of Batman Forever has Bruce meet Edward Nygma first and then go off to stop Two-Face's bank heist. The theatrical cut flips this round, presumably so that the film could start with a kind of a big action scene. It kind of has a knock-on effect throughout the film in that it kind of messes up a few bits, but we'll get to that later. So Nygma has a bit more to say here before he greets Bruce Wayne. He's talking to himself in his cubicle as if he's having dinner with Bruce Wayne. Number 5, next, at the bank, Two-Face has a little bit more dialogue. After he tells the security guard that he's going to be bait, one of Two-Face's thugs says that they should just kill him, at which point Two-Face repeatedly slaps the henchman and tells him never to question him again. Number 6, when the bank vault is being hauled away by the helicopter, Two-Face talks a bit more to Batman, reminding him that he abandoned him to that madhouse and how they were once allies. Number 7, a little later we get some more dialogue where Two-Face finds that Batman is hanging from the chain, and he says the line, "If the Bat wants to play, we'll play," which is in the theatrical trailer. Number 8, after Two-Face kills the pilot, Batman busts through the window. We get some more dialogue between the hero and the villain. More importantly, in this exchange, Two-Face says to Batman, "You're a killer too." Now this phrase pops up a few more times later on in the film. It's something that obviously haunts Bruce. This is obviously a reference to kind of Batman killing people in the previous kind of Burton films. Number 9, after Nygma kills Stickley, the dialogue is a little bit more extended. Rather than the succinct, "Why hasn't anyone put you in your place?" we get a bit more of kind of, "Why are you so debonair? Successful, richer than God. Why should you have it all and not me?" It's kind of like on the nose. It's kind of like he's talking to like Bruce, who's kind of not there, he's talking to him. Number 10, after this we get a brief dream sequence where young Bruce Wayne falls through the hole with the red book, and Bruce hears Two-Face again saying, "You're a killer too," kind of like in the background. Bruce wakes up and is greeted by Alfred. Alfred picks up the batsuit off the floor, implying that Bruce has come home after the bank heist, stripped off by his bed and gone to sleep. Alfred gives him a videotape of Two-Face from when he was in Arkham that he puts on, and he starts watching, and Two-Face is mumbling some nonsense. He says, "I'll find a land where the light is shadow and the freaks are kings." And then again he says, "You're a killer too, Bruce," and kind of Bruce has to like rewind the tape and check that he said that and he didn't say that, and it's kind of like, again, it's sort of playing on his mind and he's kind of hearing it everywhere. Bruce then tells Alfred about how Chase called him crazy last night and asks Alfred to remind him why he became Batman. Alfred says, "To avenge your dear parents." And Bruce brings up the night of his parents' wake. He asks Alfred why he ran out into the storm, and Alfred doesn't have a clear answer. Number 11, the next edition is at the circus. While Chase and Bruce are talking about how she's met someone, Chase, out of nowhere, just repeats the phrase, "A land of light and shadow, where the beasts dance and freaks are kings." And this immediately makes Bruce realise that's what Two-Face was referring to in the Arkham video. The circus, this is the land of light and shadow where beasts dance and freaks are kings, obviously. Two-Face immediately turns up right after she said this, so it's sort of like no real help to Bruce. Number 12, Two-Face again gets a little bit more to say before he shoots the Graysons. He says, "Day in, day out, time passes, fate has her fancies, Godstad's absence, daydreaming, the universe asks the same old question, life or death." Number 13, the scene where Chase calls Batman using bat signal is the same, but obviously its position is moved. In the theatrical cut, she says, "Last night at the bank." But in the script and in the original cut, she says last night at the circus, which makes much more sense because she's talking about Two-Face's coin, and during the bank heist, she didn't see him. She was down on the ground. So number 14, while Batman is escaping Two-Face, before the sequence where he drives the Batmobile up the wall, he drives the Batmobile over a roof, and the wheels produce tiny suction cups that allow him to stick to the roof. This is almost like, reminds me a lot of the scene in Batman Begins with the tank, with the tumbler kind of driving over the roofs. Number 15, there's no scene in the script where Nygma is trying to come up with his villain identity. That must have been something that was added later, I don't know. Number 16, there's a little bit more bickering between Sugar and Spice at Two-Face's hideout. When Riddler shows up, there's a bit more dialogue. He explicitly says to Two-Face that the box makes you smarter. Number 17, during the crime wave, we see Riddler use a device that redirects Batman's crime alert, sending him to the wrong locations. So the Batman portion of this is available on the deleted scene, as a deleted scene on the DVD. This is where he gets sent to like a beauty salon or like a hairdresser's. Yeah. Number 18, next is an extra line while Bruce is watching the news report about Riddler, where he realises he's been misdirected. And it says, like, explicitly says, like, the Riddler is working with Two-Face. Number 19, during the raid on the Diamond Exchange, we get a little bit more of the Riddler and the security guard. After failing to punch him out, the Riddler then beats him up with a cane while saying, "Batter up." Number 20, next we get a scene where Dick is training on a boxing dummy, kind of wooden dummy, with a picture of Two-Face attached to it, kind of cut out of a newspaper. Bruce comes in and tells Dick not to let his passion twist into hatred, and it ends with Bruce roundhouse kicking the dummy, smashing it in two. This scene, again, is on the DVD. Number 21, we get a brief shot of Claw Island showing the production line of robot arms building the box. 22, we get a brief bit of Bruce Wayne at his desk. His assistant Margaret drops a pile of paperwork on his desk, but Bruce, for a second, sees it as the Red Book from his dreams. Number 23, where then we get a scene in the Batcave. Alfred reminds Bruce that he hasn't finished the sonar suit, i.e. the one from the end of the movie. They go through the riddles so far at the end, and then Bruce and Alfred try and open up one of Nygma's box machines, which automatically self-destructs when they open it, kind of just... 24, when Dick is out on the streets with the Batmobile, there's a bit more dialogue with the four women. Were they on Vogue? I can't remember. And he tries to explain that he's got room in the car for all of them, which is crap. It's a two-seater. Number 25, as Dick, Bruce, and Chase are entering the Nygma party for the new improved box, Dick aggressively teases Bruce that he's going to reveal his secret identity, which obviously he knows now. And he says, like, Bruce, to which Bruce jokingly replies, "Don't make me kill you." 26, when Bruce steps into the booth, there's a POV shot so that we see what he's seeing when the box is kind of like hooked up to him. And he's in a jungle, and there's a holographic woman introducing herself, explaining that she'll be his guide. Number 27, there's a quick scene just as Batman is chasing after Two-Face, where Sugar and Spice are trying to flee in the confusion, and they're both balked at having to run away in heels. So Spice gets on her cell phone and says, "I know a guy with a helicopter," i.e. they're going to like get a lift from the top of the building rather than try and run out. Number 28, when Two-Face is about to shoot the gas pipe, he said a little bit more. He says, "The bat hath flown, now shall be done a deed of dreadful note," before trying to remember where the quote was from. I think this is like a running thing. Like, I think like his intelligent part and his kind of like gangstery part. His intelligent part is kind of like a bit more Shakespearean, and his gangstery part is a bit more kind of like rough and ready. Next, 29. After the pipe explodes and covers Batman in fireball, he starts singing "We Are the Champions." I don't know, maybe that was a Rights thing, i.e. the Queen song. Maybe that's a Rights thing. Number 30. Again, after shooting the sand down on Batman, he starts speaking in a Shakespearean tone before he asks the thugs whether they want to go for donuts. I think that's sort of meant to be the kind of two sides of his personality. Number 31. After Bruce tells Dick off in the Batcave, there's more with Bruce and Alfred discussing why he became Batman, and it ends with Alfred telling Bruce to call Chase and tell her the truth. And it ends with Bruce picking up the phone, and he asks, before he talks to her, he says, "Who am I, Alfred? I don't think I know anymore." This again is setting up something later on in the film where he has like a brief memory loss. Number 32, when Two-Face and Riddler are in the throne room, there's a little bit more at the beginning of the scene where Two-Face is kind of upbeat about how Batman's dead, and then Riddler breaks his joy by showing him the newspaper, showing him that Batman survived. Two-Face once again threatens to kill Riddler, and that's when the Riddler shows him Bruce's mind scan. Number 33, during the part where Two-Face is repeatedly flipping his coin, he says a little bit more to himself. Number 34, after Two-Face shoots Bruce and he falls down the stairs unconscious, a little bit more between Riddler and Two-Face, where Riddler reminds Two-Face that they can't kill him yet. Number 35, there's a cool visual that should have been in the film of the Batsuits melting in the destroyed Batcave, which would have been great. I would have loved that. Number 36, after the attack on Wayne Manor, Bruce wakes up. Alfred tells him that the cave has been destroyed, to which Bruce replies, "What cave?" Alfred leads him down the cave, and they survey the devastation, and Bruce explains that although he remembers being Bruce Wayne, he does not remember being Batman. Number 37, at Claw Island there's an additional bit where Chase tells Riddler there's a reason why people only use a fraction of your brain. By using the box, he is frying his brain. The Riddler responds by injecting her with a large syringe, and she passes out. I assume this was cut. This is in a lot of kind of stills, and it's in the comic book adaptation. I assume it was cut just because for a rating reason. I don't know if it's kind of creepy, kind of injecting kind of a tied up woman. Number 38. Inside the cave, Bruce walks into this narrow passage. This is the main thing. And he finds himself in a part of the cave from his nightmares. This is the location when he ran out of his parents' wake with the Red Book, and he finds it on the floor, seemingly untouched and pristine, despite the fact it's been above a hole for like 30 odd years. And he opens it, and he finds out it's his father's diary. And he reads the final entry. Bruce insists on seeing a movie tonight, and he tears up thinking like he's responsible for his parents' death, taking them to see that movie. But then he reads on, he turns the page, he reads on, and it says, "But Martha and I have our hearts set on Zorro, so Bruce's cartoon will have to wait until next week." At which point Bruce, tears start coming down Bruce's eyes, and he's like, "It's not my fault, it wasn't my fault," and he says this out loud. And then he stands up, and a bat starts flying towards him from the darkness, and he stands firm, and we see this bat, like the closer it gets, the more we realise it's actually a huge bat, a huge man-sized bat. Not man-bat, a huge man-sized bat. And he raises his hands out, and the bat raises his wings out, and the two just kind of like stand and face off against each other. And it's an awesome scene. And then he comes out of the cave and he says to Alfred, "Batman, Alfred, I'm Batman." Now this scene, minus the voiceover for the diary entries, is on the DVD. This is the most significant portion of the film that's omitted. Obviously this got cut, and it got tweaked earlier on, that his revelation about what the diary was comes way earlier. He tells it to Chase. He's like, "It was my father's diary," and he'd never written it again. Number 39. When Batman and Robin get to Claw Island, there's no holy medal line in the script, so I assume that was like a late last-minute ad-lib. Number 40. Confronting the Riddler on his throne. There's some slightly different dialogue. The Riddler explicitly says, "I know who I really am. Let's help you decide once and for all who you are." And this is him talking to Batman. Number 41, in a callback to an earlier scene, we get a little scene with Sugar and Spice, once again trying to flee the devastation on Claw Island, but this time they're worried they're going to get their hair wet. So Spice gets on her cell phone again and says, "I know a guy with a yacht." The final scene, again, is the deleted scene of Chase riding in the back of a car. "Does it ever end, Alfred?" "No, miss, not in this lifetime." and then we cut to the top of a skyscraper. Batman stands silhouetted against the bat signal, and then Robin steps out into frame. The end. Kind of a repetition of the kind of like the 1989 ending. But wait, there's more. Okay, so number 43. Mind Kids Egg also released a film schedule and list of pickup shots. Now there's mention of 2 scenes on Claw Island, one involving Nygma and a realtor, and presumably this is where he purchases the island. I'm going to take a guess, because there's no mention of this in the script, that this would have been just a quick shot of Nygma maybe shaking hands with a realtor or something. Number 44, the film schedule also mentions a scene involving Nygma and construction workers. Again, I'm assuming this was kind of maybe dialogueless, just a visual shot of him driving around, supervising the building of Claw Island. And lastly, and this is a bit of a mystery, there's a screenshot that recently surfaced involving Two-Face pointing a gun at what looks like a guy in a Georgian wig. Now this seems to be from an earlier draft where Two-Face and the Riddler used the box to hypnotise an audience at an opera and rob them. This all happens while Batman's been redirected somewhere else. So this wasn't in the script, but seemingly got shot. So who knows, you know, I guess this is sort of like, you know, they had the robbery at the jewellery store and the robbery at the opera house. I guess maybe, you know, there's like a whole montage really, isn't there? I guess maybe they felt they didn't really need both, and that the jewellery store made more sense. And there's loads of other minor things as well, like there's a shot definitely that they did of Edward Nygma cutting his long hair off. There's mention in the continuity list that they were going to shoot the bat smashing through the window in the Wayne Manor Library, presumably at the wake. So there you have it. That's probably what the Schumacher cut of Batman Forever probably has in it. Those are the missing little bits. Whether or not Joel would have wanted to add all these bits back in, we don't know. I think if all of them were put back in, you're probably looking at an extra kind of like 20, maybe 30 minutes. It would probably run about 2 hours, 30 minutes plus credits. It's tough to gauge. Editing a movie, you know, is assembling scenes. Who knows what the other early cuts of the films were like? Were they more serious? Did they cut some of the gags? Did scenes play out a little slower, you know, with more kind of like pauses and a bit more kind of breathing space? Who knows? Who knows? Is there a cut ready to go? Obviously, this preview cut 1 that Akiva Goldsman watched is available, but I imagine it's probably maybe a rough cut if it is a kind of early preview cut. Who knows? If Akiva can shed some more light on this, that would be great as to kind of like how long it is, what's in it, great. The quality of the deleted scenes on the DVD, which were a little rough and grainy and without polished audio, lead me to believe that like a proper finished cut wasn't made. You know that that bit I was talking about earlier where Joel Schumacher said he offered to do a director's cut. I think that was like a proposal rather than an actual kind of physical kind of thing. I think if that had been made, these scenes would be much more polished. The delete scenes would be much more polished. I think reintegrating the scenes back in isn't a huge task. There's an excellent fan edit called the Batman Forever virtual workprint that edited the 7 deleted scenes from the DVD, plus a few extra lines from the trailers, back into the film really seamlessly. The editor used like additional music and sound effects, and the result was pretty great. Like, have a look at it. It's very, very easy to find. Batman Forever virtual workprint. I think making a Schumacher cut would be an interesting experiment. It would give people a fresh perspective on the film. I don't love all the stuff that was deleted. You know, some of the scenes, you know, scenes are removed from movies for a variety of reasons, not least pacing. You know, some things look great on paper, but maybe don't translate well to screen. The Red Book is a really, really neat idea, but it comes at kind of like a bit of an awkward point in the film, and I do worry it's a little like it kind of like solves Bruce Wayne's childhood trauma maybe a little too neatly. I really like the pace of the theatrical cut. You know, it is like a kind of like roller coaster kind of like ride. You know, with all that said, I'd still love to see a Schumacher cut to see whether my vague opinions about it being better or worse, where it would stack up. I love alternate cuts of movies. You know, the Blade Runner final cut, the Alien special edition, even terrible movies like Highlander 2, the Renegade cut. It's fascinating to see these, And I think if the Snyder Cut proved anything, it's that the studio sometimes doesn't get it right. The screenwriter William Goldsman once said, "Nobody knows anything, not one person in the entire motion picture field knows for certainty what's going to work. Every time out, it's a guess, and if you're lucky, an educated one." That doesn't just apply to writing, that applies to all aspects of film, even editing. So if you want the Schumacher Cut, get out there, tweet for it, and ask for it, but this is probably what it contains.